I am Maya, 35 years old, and for my entire life, my family treated my financial stability as their personal safety net. I built a highly successful career as a forensic accountant and secretly acquired a massive commercial real estate empire while my parents crowned my younger sister Jasmine the golden child of the family. But the day they crossed the line from toxic entitlement to federal fraud was the day I stopped being their scapegoat and became their absolute worst nightmare. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon. The voice on the other end was cold and dripping with judgment. The administrator from an elite private academy informed me that my daughter had been sitting in the main office for 4 hours. She threatened to call the police for child neglect if I did not arrive immediately. I gripped my phone utterly bewildered and replied that I did not have a daughter, that I was 35 and fiercely single. The woman scoffed, insisting my name, my social security number, and my direct contact information were printed clearly on the primary parental file. I had no idea that driving to that school would uncover a web of identity theft, child abandonment, and financial ruin orchestrated by my own flesh and blood. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to financially cut off toxic family members to protect your peace. I was in the middle of unraveling a complex corporate embezzlement case for a major Atlanta firm when that phone call shattered my focus. The caller identified herself as the principal of Oak Ridge Preparatory Academy, a ridiculously expensive private school in the upscale northern suburbs. My mind raced as I shoved my audit files into my leather briefcase and rushed out to my car. My heart pounded against my ribs as I navigated the heavy afternoon traffic. How did an elite institution have my highly protected personal information? I make my living tracing hidden assets and exposing financial deception. My own data is locked down tighter than a Federal Reserve Bank, or so I thought. I pulled into the pristine circular driveway of the academy, my tires screeching slightly against the perfectly manicured pavement. I marched through the heavy oak double doors and straight to the main reception desk. The administrative assistant gave me a look of profound disapproval before pointing toward a wooden bench against the far wall. Sitting there swinging her small legs and clutching a worn stuffed rabbit was Zuri, my 6-year-old niece, Jasmine and Trent's daughter. Zuri looked up, her large brown eyes pooling with unshed tears. She threw herself into my arms the moment I knelt down. I hugged her tightly, my confusion morphing into a cold, terrifying dread. The principal walked out of his office, a man whose tailored suit perfectly matched his condescending tone. He handed me a thick manila folder containing the enrollment documents. I opened the file and the breath completely left my lungs. There, staring back at me, was my name, listed as the primary mother and financial sponsor, my home address, my employment history, my banking details, and my social security number were all meticulously filled out. At the bottom of the page, my signature had been flawlessly forged. Jasmine had not simply forgotten to pick up her child, she had stolen my identity. The principal cleared his throat and handed me another piece of paper. It was a final notice for an overdue tuition balance of $18,000 issued directly to me. He warned me that if the balance was not settled by Friday, Zuri would be expelled and my account would be sent to collections. I stood in the immaculate school office, the heavy tuition bill trembling in my hand as the reality of my sister's actions washed over me. Jasmine and her white husband Trent were obsessed with projecting an image of extreme wealth and high society status. Trent ran a tech startup that he constantly bragged about at family dinners, while Jasmine spent her days posting staged photos of designer handbags and luxury cars on social media to maintain her influencer facade. They lived far beyond their means, a fact I had always suspected but never bothered to investigate. Now it was agonizingly clear that Trent's business was failing, and they had used my pristine financial credentials to bypass the school's rigorous credit check so they could keep up appearances. I smiled politely at the principal, masking the absolute fury boiling in my veins. I assured him the financial misunderstanding would be handled immediately. I signed Zuri out under my own forged name to avoid causing a scene that would terrify my niece further, and walked her out to my car. Once Zuri was safely buckled into the back seat with a snack, I pulled out my phone and dialed Jasmine's number. It went straight to voicemail. I called Trent. Straight to voicemail. A dark, sinking feeling settled in my stomach. They were not just running late, they were completely off the grid. I started the engine and drove directly to my parents' house. Calvin and Brenda lived in a sprawling suburban neighborhood, a house they constantly leveraged to maintain their own illusion of upper-class success. They were the ultimate enablers. For my entire life, they had sacrificed my well-being, my emotional needs, and my financial security to prop up Jasmine. When Jasmine wrecked a car at 19, my college savings magically disappeared to cover the damages. When Trent wanted an extravagant destination wedding, my parents took out a second mortgage expecting me to help them pay it off because I had a good job. I was the reliable workhorse, the invisible safety net, while Jasmine was the precious gem to be protected at all costs. I pulled into their driveway, unbuckled Zuri, and walked up to the front door. I rang the bell continuously until my mother opened it. Brenda stood there in a silk robe, a glass of expensive red wine in one hand, looking entirely unbothered by my unexpected arrival. She glanced down at Zuri, then up at me with a mild look of annoyance. I did not yell. I kept my voice dangerously calm as I asked where my sister was. My mother took a slow sip of her wine and sighed as if my presence was a tremendous burden. She casually informed me that Jasmine and Trent had boarded a flight to the Maldives that morning. She said they needed a couple of weeks to decompress because Trent's startup was under so much stress. She waved her hand dismissively and told me to just watch Zuri for the next 14 days. She actually had the nerve to look me in the eye and say I did not have a husband or kids, so it was not like I had real responsibilities. My blood ran ice cold. They had abandoned a 6-year-old child at a school they defrauded, fled the country for a luxury vacation, and left me to pick up the pieces. I asked my mother if she knew Jasmine had forged my signature and stolen my identity to enroll Zuri at Oak Ridge. Brenda rolled her eyes, annoyed that I was being so difficult. She said family helps family, and that I was being completely dramatic over some paperwork. She reached into the pocket of her silk robe, pulled out a crisp $100 bill, and shoved it into my hand. She told me to buy Zuri some groceries and stop making a fuss. I looked at the wrinkled bill in my palm. Then I looked at my mother, perfectly content to let her golden child commit federal crimes and abandon her granddaughter, so long as the illusion of their success remained intact. I looked down at Zuri, who was holding my hand tightly, her small face etched with confusion and fear. I did not scream. I did not throw the money back in her face. I did not demand an apology. Instead, the forensic accountant inside me woke up. A cold, surgical precision replaced the shock and the hurt. I knew that if Jasmine was brazen enough to forge my name for private school tuition, she absolutely did not stop there. I smiled a thin, empty smile at my mother, turned around and walked back to my car with my niece. I did not shed a single tear on the drive to my house. I was already calculating my next moves. The era of Maya the scapegoat was officially over. It was time to audit my sister's entire existence, and I was going to collect every single debt this family owed me. I set Zuri up in my guest room with dinner and cartoons. I pull out my laptop, bypass standard consumer checks, and run a deep dive forensic audit on my own identity. The results load and my jaw tightens. My pristine credit has tanked. Jasmine and Trent have taken out a $200,000 business loan in my name to keep Trent's failing tech startup afloat. They used my financial history to secure the capital, funneling it directly into Trent's LLC. Zuri looks around my home with wide eyes, completely overwhelmed by the quiet calm of the space. My family thinks I live in a cramped, modest apartment because I have never bothered to correct their assumptions. They have absolutely no idea that I own a custom-built smart home in one of the most secure, exclusive gated communities in Atlanta. I bring Zuri a plate of warm food. She eats like she has not had a proper meal all day, her small hands gripping the fork tightly. She looks up at me with profound sadness and asks if her mom is going to be mad that she is staying with me instead of waiting at the school. The pure, heartbreaking innocence in her voice cracks my heart wide open, but it also hardens my resolve into absolute steel. I sit beside her, promise her that she is safe, and assure her that no one is going to be mad at her. I wait until her eyes get heavy, and she falls asleep under the soft blankets. Then I walk down the hall to my home office, lock the heavy oak door, and wake up my workstation. As a forensic accountant, I make my living tracking missing millions for massive corporations. I dismantle offshore tax havens, uncover hidden assets, and expose arrogant executives who think they are smarter than the paper trails they leave behind. I know exactly where to look, how to bypass the basic consumer credit bureaus, and how to dig straight into the Federal Clearinghouse databases, where the real financial skeletons are buried. My fingers fly across the keyboard. I open my secure, encrypted portals. I initiate a comprehensive sweep of my social security number, pulling highly classified data from the past 12 months. The progress bar flashes across my primary monitor, illuminating the dark room. When the final report populates on the screen, I stop breathing. For over a decade, I have maintained a flawless credit score. It is a number I have guarded fiercely because my immaculate financial reputation is the cornerstone of my career and my secret commercial real estate investments. That pristine score is gone. It has been completely decimated, dragged down by massive glaring defaults. Right there, blaring at me in harsh red text, is a commercial bridge loan, $200,000, originated exactly 4 months ago. I click into the loan details, my eyes scanning the heavily encrypted banking records. The loan was approved by a mid-tier regional bank, the exact kind of institution that prioritizes automated approval algorithms over thorough face-to-face human verification. I pull the digital copies of the origination documents. My stomach churns with a toxic mixture of absolute disgust and sheer disbelief. There is my name. There is my forged signature, practiced and copied with terrifying accuracy. But forgery alone does not secure a six-figure commercial loan. They needed heavy documentation, they needed proof of income tax returns and verified liquid assets. I stare at the attached files, my mind racing to figure out how Jasmine acquired my highly classified financial records. Then the realization hits me like a physical blow to the chest. Last spring, my father asked me to help him organize his tax documents because he was facing a minor audit from the IRS. Being the dutiful, reliable daughter I had always been conditioned to be, I spent an entire weekend at my parents' house, sorting through his messy, disorganized files. I had brought my own personal tax returns in a sealed envelope to reference a specific deduction protocol. I accidentally left that envelope on his desk when I had to rush out to take an emergency client call. I asked him to shred it the next day. He promised me he would. He lied. Calvin and Brenda did not just turn a blind eye to Jasmine's reckless behavior. They actively handed over my private, highly sensitive financial documents so their golden child and her entitled white husband could commit federal wire fraud. They handed Trent my life's work on a silver platter because they truly believed his tech startup was destined to make them all incredibly rich. Trent always strutted around our family barbecues, talking in circles about disruptive algorithms and venture capital. He possessed that specific brand of arrogant privilege, easily coasting on buzzwords and assumed competence, while looking down his nose at my accounting career as if I were just a glorified human calculator. My parents ate up every single word he said. They treated him like a visionary genius while treating me like the unpaid family servant. And when Trent's visionary genius ran out of cash, they decided my unblemished identity was the perfect collateral. The severe gravity of the situation locks my muscles. This is not just a petty family dispute over stolen money. This is an existential threat to everything I have painstakingly built from the ground up. I hold an active CPA license. I run a highly vetted financial firm. I am the sole owner of a blind limited liability company that holds tens of millions of dollars in premium commercial real estate across the city. If this fraudulent loan defaults and goes into heavy litigation, the regional bank could file a massive lien against my assets. A criminal fraud investigation could trigger an automatic suspension of my professional licenses. Jasmine and Trent did not just steal $200,000. They strapped a ticking bomb to my entire empire and walked away to drink champagne on a luxury yacht. I do not cry. I do not throw things or scream into the void. Emotion is a luxury for people who are not in the middle of a war, and a war has just been declared. I open a new secure window on my monitor and begin tracing the funds. I follow the digital breadcrumbs from the regional bank directly into a corporate account registered to Trent's business. From there, I pull the public expense records and cross-reference them with the corporate data I can legally access through my firm. The money was not used to develop software. It was not used to hire engineers, secure patents, or expand operations. The money bled out in a steady, sickening stream of pure vanity. I see wire transfers to luxury car dealerships to lease the imported sports car Trent drives to family dinners. I see massive monthly payments to high-end event planners, catering companies, and boutique public relations firms used strictly to maintain Jasmine's fake influencer lifestyle. I see the exact transaction for the first-class plane tickets and the luxury resort in the Maldives where they are currently vacationing. They abandoned their traumatized 6-year-old daughter in a school office so they could spend my stolen money on a tropical photo shoot. My jaw clenches so hard my teeth ache. They think I am weak. They think I am the same desperate, eager-to-please girl who used to beg for Calvin and Brenda's affection and approval. They think I will absorb this massive debt silently to protect the family name, just like I absorbed every other insult, slight, and theft over the past 3 decades. They are dead wrong. I highlight the loan documents, the forged signatures, the fraudulent tax submissions, and the wire transfers. I hit print. The laser printer in the corner of my office hums to life, spitting out page after page of undeniable federal evidence. I create an encrypted password-protected folder on my local drive and begin compiling a massive airtight prosecution file. I am going to build a legal cage so flawless, so heavily reinforced with irrefutable proof that no high-priced defense attorney will ever be able to dismantle it. I sit back in my ergonomic leather chair, the cool glow of the monitors casting long shadows across my dark office. I listen to the quiet, rhythmic breathing of my niece sleeping down the hall, completely unaware of the monsters her parents truly are. Jasmine and Trent took my name because they thought it carried no power, no bite, and no consequence. They assumed my quiet stability was a sign of utter complacency. But forensic accountants do not just count money. We destroy lies. I pull out my phone and look at the careless text message from my mother, demanding I keep the peace and play the good sister while they play rich. I set the phone face down on the desk. The time for keeping the peace is over. I am going to tear their fraudulent world down to the studs, and I am going to make sure they feel every single consequence they thought they could escape. I barely sleep that night. When the sun finally begins to rise over Atlanta, I am already dressed and running on pure adrenaline and dark coffee. I call Ms. Cora, a retired nurse and one of my most trusted neighbors in my secure gated community. I pay her handsomely to watch Zuri for the morning. Zuri is still asleep in the guest room, wrapped securely in a heavy duvet, completely shielded from the storm I am about to unleash. I kiss her forehead softly, lock my front door, and walk out to my car. I drive across town toward my parents' neighborhood. The contrast between my quiet, private estate and their flashy, heavily mortgaged subdivision is stark. Calvin and Brenda live in a sprawling house with a perfectly manicured lawn, a house they bought purely to impress people they do not even truly like. They have always cared more about the appearance of generational wealth than actual financial stability. They are the ultimate enablers, the kind of parents who will set themselves on fire just to keep their golden child warm. Today I am going to show them exactly what happens when you play with fire. I park in their wide driveway. I do not bother ringing the doorbell. I use the spare emergency key they gave me years ago, a key I have never used until this exact moment. I step into the grand foyer. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and frying bacon wafts from the kitchen. It is a picturesque, peaceful Sunday morning. I walk straight into the formal dining room, my leather briefcase heavy in my hand. My father, Calvin, is sitting at the head of the long mahogany table reading a golf magazine. My mother, Brenda, is pouring herself a cup of coffee. They look up startled by my sudden and silent appearance. Brenda immediately frowns, tightening her silk robe around her waist. She asks where Zuri is and why I am bothering them so early on a weekend. She actually sounds annoyed, as if my presence is an unwarranted disruption to her perfect morning. I do not say good morning. I do not offer a polite greeting. I reach into my briefcase, pull out the thick, heavy stack of printed federal loan documents, and drop it directly onto the center of the dining table. The heavy thud of the paper echoes sharply in the quiet room. I tell them I found the loan. I tell them I know exactly what they did. Calvin glances at the front page. His posture stiffens, but he does not look surprised. He does not look ashamed. He looks annoyed that he has been caught. Brenda sets her coffee mug down, her eyes darting quickly away from mine. They knew. They knew every single detail. I lean over the table, keeping my voice dangerously low and completely steady. I ask them how long they have been helping Jasmine and Trent commit federal wire fraud. I point to the third page of the origination contract. Right there, Jasmine's perfect forgery of my signature are the signatures of two official witnesses, Calvin and Brenda. My own parents co-signed their names to a fraudulent federal document, legally verifying an identity theft that could completely destroy my entire life. Calvin sighs loudly, taking off his reading glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose, as if I am simply a rebellious teenager acting out. He uses his deep, authoritative, patriarchal voice, the one he always uses when he expects me to just fall in line. He tells me that Trent is on the verge of a massive tech breakthrough. He says Trent just needed a temporary bridge loan to secure his next round of venture capital funding. Calvin actually looks me right in the eye and tells me that family helps family. He says I make plenty of money, and he tells me not to be so greedy. I stare at the man who raised me. The absolute audacity of his statement hangs thick and suffocating in the air. He is defending a mediocre white man who is bleeding his daughter dry, while simultaneously treating his own highly successful black daughter like a disposable, unlimited bank account. Calvin has always craved proximity to Trent's assumed privilege, treating my brother-in-law like the visionary prodigy he always wanted, while looking down on my accounting career as if I am just a glorified human calculator. Brenda chimes in, crossing her arms defensively. She says Jasmine deserves a beautiful life and that I should be proud to help my sister achieve her dreams. She tells me the loan will be paid back eventually, and that I am making a massive deal out of a standard temporary financial strategy. She actually rolls her eyes and tells me to stop being so dramatic over some paperwork. I do not give them a tearful monologue. I do not cry. I do not beg them to love me or ask them why my hard work was never good enough for them. I snap back with the cold, hard facts of their lifelong betrayal. I ask them if this is the same kind of help they gave me when I was 18 years old. I remind them of the day they emptied my entire college savings account, the money I had worked multiple part-time jobs to build, just so they could pay for Jasmine's lavish destination wedding to Trent. I remind them that I had to take out massive high-interest student loans and work exhausting graveyard shifts just to pay for my accounting degree while Jasmine drank expensive champagne on a private beach. I point a rigid finger at the documents on the table. I tell them this is not a family favor. This is not a temporary bridge loan or a clever financial strategy. This is felony identity theft. This is federal wire fraud. This is criminal conspiracy. I explain the brutal reality of my profession to them in words so sharp they cut through the room. I hold an active license as a certified public accountant. I run a highly vetted forensic accounting firm. I handle tens of millions of dollars for massive corporate clients and federal agencies. If this fraudulent $200,000 loan defaults, which it absolutely will because Trent is drowning in debt and running a failing company, the bank will come after me. A criminal fraud investigation will trigger an automatic, immediate suspension of my professional licenses. Everything I have spent my entire life building, my immaculate reputation, my career, and my secret commercial real estate portfolio will be entirely wiped out. I look directly at my father. I ask him if he truly expects me to lose my entire livelihood, to face absolute financial ruin, just so Trent can lease imported sports cars and Jasmine can pretend to be a wealthy socialite for her internet followers. Calvin opens his mouth to speak, but the words die in his throat. The severe gravity of the legal terms I just used finally penetrates his arrogant delusion. Felony, wire fraud, conspiracy. These are not words you can brush away with a fatherly sigh or a condescending lecture. He looks down at the papers, his hands suddenly trembling slightly. Brenda's face turns a sickening shade of pale gray. She realizes that her signature on that witness line makes her an active, legally liable participant in a federal crime. She stammers frantically, trying to backtrack. She claims Trent assured them it was perfectly legal, that it was just a family investment maneuver. She says Trent told them I had already given verbal permission for the loan and they were just helping speed up the paperwork. I cut her off immediately. I tell her that ignorance is not a valid defense in a federal indictment. I tell them that by handing Trent my highly classified tax returns and signing as official witnesses, they actively participated in a scheme that defrauds a federally insured banking institution. I make sure my voice is perfectly clear when I tell them the penalty for wire fraud is up to 20 years in federal prison. The dining room goes completely terrifyingly silent. The only sound is the low humming of the refrigerator in the background. The smell of breakfast now makes me want to be physically sick. Their guilty silence confirms everything I ever suspected. They were so blinded by their desperation to maintain a wealthy image, so obsessed with elevating the golden child, that they willingly served up their other daughter as a sacrificial lamb. They did not care if I lost everything, as long as Jasmine kept her perfect lifestyle. I gather my briefcase and step back from the table. I tell them they have made their choices and now they will have to survive the consequences. Calvin suddenly stands up, raising his hands in a frantic, placating gesture. He begs me to sit down and talk about this reasonably. He says we can fix this without involving the authorities or ruining the family name. He promises they will call Trent right now and make him pay the money back tomorrow. I look at him with absolute unyielding ice. I tell him the money is already gone. Trent spent it on luxury vacations, vanity public relations firms, and expensive catered parties. There is no money left to pay back. I look at both of my parents, seeing them not as the authorities who raised me, but as the pathetic image-obsessed accomplices they truly are. I tell my parents that they stopped being my family the exact moment they decided my total ruin was an acceptable price to pay for Jasmine's comfort. I turn around and walk toward the front door. Brenda calls out my name, her voice finally cracking with genuine, unadulterated fear. But I do not stop. I do not look back. I walk out into the bright Sunday morning sunshine, get into my car, and drive away. They thought they could use my name to build their fragile house of cards, but they forgot one crucial detail. I am the forensic accountant, and I am the one who knows exactly how to tear it all down. Your daughter has been sitting in the main office for 4 hours. The stern voice on the other end of the line snapped, leaving absolutely no room for negotiation. If you are not here in 20 minutes, I am legally obligated to call Child Protective Services for abandonment. I stared blindly at the financial audit files spread across my heavy mahogany desk, the numbers blurring together as a cold wave of confusion washed over me. I gripped my phone and calmly told the woman that she had made a terrible mistake. I told her I am 35 years old. I am fiercely single. I do not have a daughter. The administrator let out an exasperated sigh, reading off my full name, my personal cell phone number, my home address, and the last 4 digits of my social security number. She told me my information was printed clearly on the primary parental emergency file. I had no idea that driving to that elite private academy would crack open a staggering web of identity theft, child abandonment, and financial ruin, orchestrated by my own flesh and blood. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to financially cut off toxic family members to protect your peace. I slammed my laptop shut and rushed out of my office building. My heart hammered against my ribs as I navigated the heavy afternoon traffic of downtown Atlanta. I am a forensic accountant. I spend my days tracing hidden assets, uncovering corporate embezzlement, and destroying the carefully constructed lies of arrogant executives. My own personal data is locked down tighter than a federal vault. The idea that a school I had never heard of possessed my most sensitive information was not just alarming, it was terrifying. I pulled into the pristine circular driveway of Oak Ridge Preparatory Academy, my tires screeching slightly against the polished asphalt. I marched through the heavy oak double doors and headed straight for the main reception desk. The administrative assistant gave me a look of profound, icy disapproval before gesturing toward a wooden bench against the far wall. Sitting there, her small legs swinging nervously above the floor, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit, was Zuri, my 6-year-old niece, Jasmine and Trent's daughter. Zuri looked up, her large brown eyes pooling with unshed tears. She threw herself into my arms the moment I knelt down. I hugged her tightly, the scent of her strawberry shampoo mixing with the sharp, sterile smell of the school office. My confusion instantly morphed into a cold, terrifying dread. Why was my niece listed as my daughter? Where was my sister? The principal walked out of his office. He was a tall man whose impeccably tailored suit perfectly matched his condescending tone. He did not offer a polite greeting. He simply handed me a thick manila folder containing the school enrollment documents. I opened the file and the breath completely left my lungs. There, staring back at me in stark black and white, was my name. I was listed as the primary mother and the sole financial sponsor. My home address in an exclusive gated community, my employment history at my firm, my exact banking details, and my social security number were all meticulously filled out on the heavy cardstock. At the bottom of the page, my signature had been flawlessly forged. Jasmine had not simply forgotten to pick up her child. She had stolen my identity. The principal cleared his throat, his gaze heavy with judgment, and handed me another piece of paper. It was a final notice for an overdue tuition balance of $18,000 issued directly to me. He warned me that if the balance was not settled by Friday, Zuri would be expelled and my account would be immediately sent to collections. I stood in that immaculate office, the heavy tuition bill trembling in my hand as the reality of my sister's actions washed over me in sickening waves. Jasmine and her white husband Trent were obsessed with projecting an image of extreme wealth and high society status. Trent ran a tech startup that he constantly bragged about at family dinners, spinning endless tales of venture capital and disruptive algorithms. Jasmine spent her days posting staged photos of designer handbags and luxury cars on social media to maintain her influencer facade. They lived far beyond their means, a fact I had always suspected but never bothered to investigate because I kept my distance. Now it was agonizingly clear that Trent's business was a hollow shell, and they had used my pristine financial credentials to bypass the school's rigorous credit check just so they could keep up appearances. I forced a polite smile for the principal, completely masking the absolute fury boiling in my veins. I assured him the financial misunderstanding would be handled immediately and requested a copy of every single document in Zuri's file. I signed my niece out under my own forged name, swallowing the bitter taste of bile in my throat to avoid causing a scene that would terrify the little girl any further. I walked her out to my car, my mind racing with terrifying legal implications. Once Zuri was safely buckled into the back seat with a juice box, I pulled out my phone. I dialed Jasmine's number. It rang once and went straight to voicemail. I dialed Trent. Straight to voicemail. A dark, sinking feeling settled deep in my stomach. They were not just running late. They had turned their phones off entirely. They were completely off the grid. I started the engine and drove directly to my parents' house. Calvin and Brenda lived in a sprawling suburban neighborhood, occupying a house they constantly leveraged with second mortgages just to maintain their own illusion of upper-class success. They were the ultimate enablers. For my entire life, they had sacrificed my well-being, my emotional needs, and my financial security to prop up Jasmine. When Jasmine wrecked a car at 19, my college savings magically disappeared to cover the damages. When Trent wanted an extravagant destination wedding, my parents drained their retirement accounts and expected me to help them pay the bills because I had a good job. I was always the reliable workhorse, the invisible safety net, while Jasmine was the precious gem to be protected at all costs. I pulled into their wide driveway, unbuckled Zuri, and walked briskly up the brick path to the front door. I rang the bell continuously, leaning on the chime until the heavy door finally swung open. My mother Brenda stood there in a floral silk robe. She was holding a glass of expensive red wine, looking entirely unbothered by my unexpected and frantic arrival. She glanced down at Zuri, who was hiding shyly behind my leg, and then looked up at me with a mild expression of annoyance. I did not yell. I kept my voice dangerously calm, the kind of quiet that precedes a devastating storm. I asked her exactly where my sister was. My mother took a slow, deliberate sip of her wine and sighed as if my mere presence on her porch was a tremendous burden. She casually informed me that Jasmine and Trent had boarded a first-class flight to the Maldives that morning. She said they desperately needed a couple of weeks to decompress because Trent's startup was under so much stress lately. She waved her manicured hand dismissively and told me to just watch Zuri for the next 14 days. She actually had the nerve to look me in the eye, chuckle softly, and say I did not have a husband or kids, so it was not like I had real responsibilities anyway. My blood ran ice cold. The sheer audacity of her statement paralyzed me for a fraction of a second. They had abandoned a 6-year-old child at a school they actively defrauded, fled the country for a luxury tropical vacation, and left me to pick up the pieces without a single word of warning. I asked my mother if she had any idea that Jasmine had forged my signature and stolen my identity to enroll Zuri at Oak Ridge. Brenda rolled her eyes, heavily annoyed that I was being so difficult and ruining her peaceful evening. She said family helps family, and that I was being completely dramatic over some silly school paperwork. She reached into the deep pocket of her silk robe, pulled out a crisp $100 bill, and shoved it toward my chest. She told me to buy Zuri some groceries, go home, and stop making such a massive fuss over nothing. I looked at the wrinkled bill fluttering in her hand. Then I looked at my mother, a woman who was perfectly content to let her golden child commit federal crimes and abandon her own granddaughter, so long as the illusion of their glamorous success remained intact. I looked down at Zuri. She was holding my hand so tightly, her little knuckles were turning white, her face etched with a quiet, terrified confusion that broke my heart. I did not scream. I did not throw the money back in my mother's face. I did not demand an apology or beg for basic human decency. Instead, the forensic accountant inside me woke up sharp and unforgiving. A cold, surgical precision replaced the shock and the hurt. I knew with absolute certainty that if Jasmine was brazen enough to forge my name for private school tuition, she absolutely did not stop there. I smiled a thin, empty smile at my mother. I turned around and walked back to my car with my niece. I did not shed a single tear on the drive to my house. I was already calculating my next moves. The era of Maya the family scapegoat was officially over. It was time to audit my sister's entire existence. The drive back to my estate is a blur of hyper-focused planning. I pass through the heavy iron security gates of my neighborhood, feeling the familiar, reassuring weight of the safety I have built for myself. I pull into my driveway and walk through my front door. Ms. Cora, my retired neighbor, meets me in the kitchen. I thank her, transfer a generous amount to her bank account for her time, and walk her out. The house is quiet again. I drop my keys on the counter and make my way down the hall to the guest room. Zuri is sitting up in bed, her small hands clutching the edge of the blanket. She looks so incredibly tiny in the center of the large mattress. I sit on the edge of the bed and ask her how she is feeling. She looks down at her hands and asks in a voice barely above a whisper when her mommy is coming back. She tells me Jasmine promised she would only be gone for one sleep. Then the real heartbreak spills out in casual, devastating fragments. Zuri tells me this happens all the time. She mentions how Trent and Jasmine frequently leave her locked in hotel rooms with nothing but a tablet and a room service menu while they attend lavish parties and industry networking events. She says they tell her to hide in the bathroom if housekeeping knocks on the door. The sheer level of reckless endangerment makes my blood run freezing cold. Jasmine and Trent did not just abandon her yesterday out of sudden panic. This is a sustained pattern of severe neglect. They use this beautiful, innocent child as a convenient prop for their social media pages to project the image of a perfect, wealthy family. But the second the cameras are off, she is nothing but an inconvenience to them. I pull Zuri into my arms, resting my chin on top of her head. I promise her, with every ounce of conviction in my soul, that she is never going to be left alone in a strange room ever again. I step out of the bedroom and walk straight into my home office. The maternal fury inside me merges seamlessly with my forensic training. I look at the forged school enrollment documents sitting on my desk. Oak Ridge Preparatory Academy gave me until Friday to pay the $18,000 tuition balance. If I simply refuse to pay, or if I expose the forgery to the school administration without a legal shield in place, the school administrators are legally designated mandated reporters. They will instantly call Child Protective Services. I know exactly what happens to Black children who get swallowed by the foster care system. The system does not care that Trent is a white tech founder or that Jasmine wears designer clothes. The system only sees an abandoned child connected to massive federal wire fraud. I absolutely refuse to let my niece become a ward of the state because her parents are narcissistic criminals. I need an ironclad legal barrier, and I need it today. I pick up my phone and dial my primary corporate attorney, Elijah. He is a brilliant, ruthless litigator who has handled all of my commercial real estate acquisitions and complex business contracts. I tell him I am facing a dire family emergency that intersects with massive financial fraud and child abandonment. He cancels his Sunday afternoon plans and meets me at his downtown office within the hour. Sitting across from Elijah in his glass-walled conference room, I lay out the entire situation. I show him the forged commercial loan documents, the fake school enrollment forms, and the unanswered text messages to Jasmine and Trent. I show him the social media posts proving they boarded a flight to the Maldives. Elijah is furious on my behalf. He immediately pulls his team in and begins drafting an emergency petition for temporary guardianship. We build an inescapable legal narrative. We use the documented abandonment, their total unresponsiveness, and the fact that they fled the country while under the shadow of an active federal fraud investigation as our primary leverage. We argue that Jasmine and Trent are severe flight risks who pose an immediate, imminent danger to the physical and emotional welfare of their minor child. Furthermore, I present my own immaculate financial portfolio and my secure, stable home environment to prove I am the only viable safe guardian for Zuri. Early Monday morning, Elijah stands before a family court judge and files the ex parte emergency motion. Given the staggering weight of the evidence, the forged school documents, the six-figure federal fraud, and the documented international flight, the judge does not even hesitate. The gavel comes down. The court grants me immediate full physical and legal temporary guardianship of Zuri. I walk out of the courthouse holding the certified stamped guardianship order. A profound sense of relief washes over me quickly, followed by a dark, triumphant satisfaction. Jasmine and Trent no longer have any legal authority over the child they discarded. Zuri is shielded by the full power of the court. Child Protective Services cannot touch her. The school cannot expel her or call the authorities on me for neglect. She is fully, entirely under my protection. I drive back to my estate. Zuri is sitting at the kitchen island, drawing a picture with a box of crayons I bought for her. I hand my newly hired nanny the rest of the day off. I sit down next to my niece, pour myself a glass of cold water, and watch her color. The most vulnerable piece of this entire disastrous puzzle has now been completely secured. My sister and her husband think they are untouchable, sipping champagne on a beach halfway across the world, assuming I am quietly cleaning up their mess. They have no idea that I have just legally stripped them of their child. The defensive phase of my operation is officially complete. Now every single move I make is purely offensive. I open my laptop on the kitchen counter. It is time to look at the commercial lease agreement Trent signed for his tech startup. I pull my car into the quiet sanctuary of my garage and walk straight through the house to my home office. My mind is operating with a cold and terrifying clarity. Calvin and Brenda made their choice. They chose the illusion of wealth and the comfort of their arrogant white son-in-law over their own flesh and blood. They decided my total financial ruin was an acceptable price to pay to keep Jasmine happy. Now I am going to dismantle their entire fabricated reality piece by piece. I lock the heavy oak door of my office, sit down at my multi-monitor workstation, and open my encrypted financial software. It is time to follow the money. I pull up the raw transaction data from the fraudulent $200,000 loan Jasmine and Trent secured in my name. The regional bank deposited the funds directly into a primary corporate checking account registered to Trent's technology startup. I watch the digital trail of the money bleeding out in real time. It is a pathetic display of extreme financial negligence. There are massive wire transfers to luxury car dealerships to cover the lease on the imported sports car Trent drives to family dinners. There are payments to boutique public relations firms, high-end event planners, and private catering companies. There is the exact transaction for the first-class airline tickets and the luxury resort in the Maldives where they are currently hiding. They took my pristine financial identity and used it to fund a lavish, empty lifestyle they could not afford. But as I scroll further down the ledger, a specific recurring transaction catches my eye. It is a massive wire transfer scheduled for a commercial property management group. I look at the destination address for Trent's corporate headquarters. Suite 400 in a premium glass-enclosed high-rise in the heart of downtown Atlanta. I stare at the address flashing on my monitor. The breath completely leaves my lungs. My heart stops beating for a fraction of a second, and then a slow, dangerous smile spreads across my face. I lean back in my leather chair and let out a dry, disbelieving laugh that echoes in the quiet room. Trent is operating his tech startup out of a building that I own. 5 years ago, I purchased that exact commercial high-rise through a blind limited liability company. It is one of the most lucrative assets in my entire real estate portfolio. Because the ownership is heavily shielded behind layers of corporate privacy structures and managed by a third-party firm. Trent has absolutely no idea who his landlord is. He has no idea that the sister-in-law he constantly belittles, the black woman he looks down on as just a boring accountant, is the person who actually owns the floor beneath his feet. The absolute poetic irony of the situation washes over me. For years, Trent has strutted around our family barbecues, swirling his expensive bourbon and talking in circles about disruptive algorithms and venture capital. My parents treated him like a Silicon Valley genius. Jasmine paraded around Atlanta, pretending she was married to the next billionaire tech titan. Meanwhile, Trent has been sitting in my building using money he stole from my identity to pay my own property management company, just to avoid being evicted from a commercial suite that I own. I open my secure property management portal and pull up the specific tenant ledger for Trent's software company. The numbers on the screen tell a completely different story than the one he sells to my parents. Trent is currently 5 months behind on his commercial rent. His company is drowning in debt. The ledger notes show that he has been dodging calls from my property managers for months, making empty promises about incoming venture capital and delayed funding rounds. I used a tiny fraction of the $200,000 he stole from me to pay off just 1 month of arrears, doing the bare minimum to keep my property managers from changing the locks on his office doors. But he is still in massive breach of his lease agreement. A normal person would call the police right now. They would hand over the loan documents and let the authorities handle the identity theft. But I am not a normal person. I am a forensic accountant whose family deliberately served her up as a sacrificial lamb. I do not just want justice. I want total, inescapable annihilation. I want them to feel the exact same level of terror and helplessness they tried to force onto me. I pull up the original commercial lease agreement Trent signed when he moved into the building. I scan the legal clauses with surgical precision. Because Trent is more than 90 days delinquent on his rent payments, the holding company holds the unilateral right to execute an immediate commercial eviction. Even better, the contract includes a specific asset seizure clause. I have the legal right to lock the doors and seize all business asset servers and equipment left inside the premises to cover the outstanding rental debt. Trent signed away his rights the moment he defaulted. I pick up my phone and call Elijah, my corporate attorney. I tell him to draft a formal immediate notice of lease termination and commercial asset seizure for Suite 400. Elijah asks if I want the property management team to deliver the notice and post it on the glass doors. I tell him no. I instruct him to prepare the documents and have them hand-delivered to my house by the end of the day. I tell him I am going to deliver the eviction notice personally. Just as I hang up the phone with my lawyer, my cell phone buzzes on the desk. It is a notification from the family group chat. Jasmine has sent a new message. It is a picture of her and Trent standing on the deck of a yacht in the Maldives, holding crystal flutes of champagne, the bright blue ocean stretching out behind them. The caption reads that they are landing back in Atlanta on Friday morning. It goes on to say that Trent is hosting a massive VIP launch party at his office this Saturday night to secure his Series B funding. Jasmine demands that everyone in the family be there to support Trent's big night. She even adds a snarky little note at the end, telling me to make sure Zuri is dressed nicely when I drop her off. I stare at the photo of my sister, her perfect smile masking the soul of a manipulative criminal. She thinks she has won. She thinks she can steal my identity, abandon her child, drain my credit, and come back to a hero's welcome while I quietly absorb the damage to protect the family name. She has no idea that she just gave me the exact time and place for her execution. I reply to the group chat with a simple thumbs up emoji. I tell them I will absolutely be there on Saturday night. I close my laptop, the trap now fully set. They wanted to play rich in my building. Now I am going to show them exactly who owns the house. I wake up the next morning feeling a sense of profound and absolute clarity. The kind of peace that only comes when you finally stop trying to save people who are actively trying to drown you. Zuri is happily eating a bowl of cereal in my kitchen safe, under my legal guardianship, and completely shielded from the chaos her parents created. I leave her with my trusted nanny and head straight to my downtown corporate office. It is time to execute the financial trap I have meticulously set. I pull out the commercial lease agreement for Trent's startup company. In commercial real estate, especially in high-end buildings like the one I own through my blind limited liability company, the leases are completely ironclad. There is no grace period for feelings. There are no extensions for family ties, especially when the tenant has absolutely no idea they are renting from their sister-in-law. I pick up my phone and call my lead property manager, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Sarah who handles the day-to-day operations of my holding company. I maintain my professional persona and instruct her to pull the complete physical and financial file for Suite 400. Sarah reads off the violations one by one, her voice laced with professional disdain. Trent is not just 5 months behind on his base rent. He has bounced 2 consecutive premium checks. He has made unauthorized structural alterations to the suite, knocking down walls without pulling permits, just to make the space look more like an open-concept Silicon Valley playground. Furthermore, he has repeatedly violated this building code by hosting loud after-hours networking events without securing the proper commercial event insurance. I listen to the list of catastrophic lease violations and feel a cold, triumphant satisfaction. I tell Sarah to halt all standard collection attempts immediately. I tell her we are bypassing the basic warning letters and going straight to the nuclear option. I instruct her to prepare an immediate commercial eviction notice due to severe breach of contract. Then I make my next call to my corporate attorney, Elijah. I drive to his office and sit across his massive glass desk. I slide the heavily tabbed lease agreement toward him and tap my finger on Section 12, the Asset Seizure Clause. I explain the full scope of the situation. Because Trent has defaulted so heavily on his rent, and because the minimal payments he did make were funded by a fraudulent $200,000 loan taken out using my stolen identity, I am executing my right as the landlord to seize every single asset inside that office. Elijah reads over the contract. He looks up at me with a sharp, deeply impressed smile. He confirms that under Georgia commercial real estate law, a landlord can legally lock the doors and seize business assets to cover outstanding rental debt when the breach is this severe and documented. Trent's expensive desktop computers, his high-end espresso machines, his data servers, and his custom designer office furniture will legally belong to my holding company the second the eviction notice is served. I tell Elijah, I want the documents drafted, officially stamped by the court, and ready for immediate execution. But I give him a very specific directive regarding the timeline. I do not want the notice served on a random Tuesday afternoon when the office is empty. I tell him about the text message Jasmine sent to our family group chat. The message where she bragged about landing back in Atlanta on Friday and hosting a massive VIP launch party at Trent's office on Saturday night. The party where Trent plans to secure his next round of venture capital funding to keep his fake empire afloat. I look my lawyer dead in the eye and tell him that I want the eviction executed on Saturday night right in the middle of their catered party. I want the doors locked and the assets seized while Trent is standing in front of his wealthy investors. Elijah nods, completely understanding the cold brilliance of the strategy. He begins drafting the extensive paperwork immediately. The rest of the week passes with an eerie, calm precision. I go about my daily life. I take Zuri to the park, buy her new clothes, and read her bedtime stories. She thrives in the quiet stability of my home, entirely separated from the chaotic, image-obsessed world her parents forced her to live in. Meanwhile, my phone constantly buzzes with messages from my mother. Brenda is in a complete frenzy over Trent's upcoming launch party. She texts me photos of the designer dresses she is considering wearing. She complains about how hard it is to find the perfect shoes to match my father's tailored suit. She even has the absolute audacity to text me and ask if I can transfer her $500 so she can get her hair and makeup professionally done for the event. She says she needs to look her absolute best because Trent will be introducing them to some of the most powerful and affluent investors in Atlanta. I read her messages and feel a detached sense of closure. She is so utterly consumed by the illusion of wealth that she cannot even see the massive legal and financial storm gathering directly above her head. She actively helped her golden child commit federal identity theft, abandoned her own granddaughter at a school office, and now she just wants to know if I will fund her salon visit so she can look rich. I do not respond to her request for money. I simply tell her I will see her at the party. Friday arrives. Jasmine and Trent land in Atlanta. Jasmine posts a highly edited video on her social media showing off her tan and bragging about how refreshed they feel after their luxury tropical vacation. She does not post a single word about her daughter. She does not call to check on Zuri. She does not even ask if the $18,000 school tuition bill was handled. She simply assumes that I, the reliable, boring, invisible sister, have quietly cleaned up her mess just like I have always done. Late Friday afternoon, Elijah's private courier arrives at my secure estate. I sign for a thick, heavy legal envelope. Inside are the final court-approved documents: the immediate commercial eviction notice, the asset seizure authorization, the formal declarations of breach of contract. They are stamped with the official county seal, signed and completely legally binding. I lay the documents out on my wide kitchen island, running my hand over the crisp white paper. This is the culmination of 35 years of being treated like a disposable asset. This is the exact price of their arrogance. I walk into my master bedroom and open my walk-in closet. I completely bypass the modest neutral clothes I usually wear to family events to keep my mother from making snide passive-aggressive comments about my body or my style. I reach for a flawless custom-tailored emerald green suit. It is sharp, powerful, and unapologetic. It is the armor of a woman who owns the building, not the scapegoat who cleans up the messes in the shadows. Saturday morning dawns, bright and clear over the city. The trap is fully set. The locksmiths are scheduled and ready to be deployed. The authorities are on standby for the federal fraud charges I filed earlier in the week. Trent and Jasmine think they are about to secure their financial future and permanently cement their elite status in Atlanta high society. They have absolutely no idea that I hold the physical deed to their destruction in my hands. I look at myself in the mirror, my expression perfectly calm and unreadable. I have the exact time and place for their execution, and I am not going to miss a single second of it. Saturday night falls over Atlanta like a heavy curtain. I stand in the quiet foyer of my and look at myself in the full-length mirror. I am wearing a custom-tailored emerald green suit. The cut is razor-sharp, the fabric expensive and unyielding. It does not look like the wardrobe of the quiet, accommodating sister who cleans up family disasters in the shadows. It looks like armor. I adjust my cuffs, pick up my black leather briefcase, and walk toward the door. Zuri is safely asleep in her new bedroom, guarded by the trusted nanny I hired and the comprehensive security system of my gated community. She is entirely shielded from the devastation I am about to unleash on her parents. I drive into the heart of downtown Atlanta. The city skyline glows against the dark sky, a towering landscape of wealth and commerce. I pull up to the premium commercial high-rise that houses Trent's startup company. The valet rushes forward to open my door, completely unaware that he is handing a claim ticket to the woman who actually owns the concrete he is standing on. I step out into the cool night air. The heavy leather briefcase in my hand contains the court-stamped immediate commercial eviction notice, the asset seizure authorization, and the undeniable proof of federal wire fraud. My heartbeat is perfectly steady. There is no fear left in my body. There is only the cold, mechanical precision of a forensic accountant stepping up to the audit. I walk through the pristine glass doors of the lobby and step into the elevator. I press the button for the 4th floor. As the numbers light up and the car ascends, I can feel the low, rhythmic vibration of heavy bass reverberating through the elevator shaft. The doors slide open, and the sheer audacity of the scene before me is almost suffocating. Trent and Jasmine have transformed the expansive commercial suite into a lavish high society playground. A live DJ is set up in the corner spinning upscale lounge music. Waitstaff in crisp black uniforms circulate through the crowd, carrying silver trays loaded with Wagyu appetizers and crystal flutes of imported champagne. In the center of the room, positioned directly under the modern track lighting, is a massive, towering ice sculpture meticulously carved into the shape of Trent's startup logo. I stand at the edge of the room and take it all in. Every single detail in this space, from the designer floral arrangements to the top shelf. Liquor pouring freely at the open bar was purchased using my stolen identity. They took my pristine financial reputation and liquefied it to throw a fake billionaire networking event. The rage burns hot and bright in the back of my mind, but I keep it securely locked behind a wall of absolute ice. I scan the crowded room and spot my parents first. Calvin and Brenda are standing near the floor-to-ceiling windows, holding court with a group of affluent local real estate investors. They are both wearing brand new designer clothes, undoubtedly paid for by the same fraudulent loan. Calvin is gesturing widely with his cocktail glass, a broad, arrogant smile on his face as he spins some fabricated tale about his genius tech founder son-in-law. Brenda is laughing elegantly, sipping her champagne, projecting the absolute picture of a proud, wealthy matriarch. Looking at my mother, laughing in her expensive silk dress, a wave of profound disgust washes over me. Just a few days ago, she stood on her front porch and handed me a crumpled $100 bill. She told me to go buy groceries for the 6-year-old granddaughter she had casually allowed to be abandoned. She signed her name as a witness to a federal crime that could have destroyed my entire life, and now she is standing here drinking stolen champagne, completely unbothered by her own depravity. They are entirely consumed by the delusion of their own manufactured importance. Across the room, standing at the center of the largest crowd, is the golden couple. Jasmine is draped in a shimmering designer gown that costs more than most people's monthly mortgage. She is tossing her hair, touching the arms of wealthy venture capitalists, and playing the role of the devoted, glamorous tech wife perfectly. Trent stands beside her in a bespoke tuxedo, flashing his charismatic, arrogant smile. He is speaking loudly about disruptive algorithms, scalability, and his upcoming Series B funding round. He is selling them an absolute ghost town of a company, desperately trying to secure real investor capital before his house of cards collapses. I grip the handle of my briefcase and step fully into the main room. I do not try to blend in. I walk with the deliberate, heavy authority of someone who owns the very floorboards everyone is standing on. It takes exactly 30 seconds for my mother to spot me. I see the exact moment her eyes land on my emerald green suit. Her fake polished smile drops instantly, replaced by a flash of genuine panic. She frantically excuses herself from the group of local investors and marches directly toward me, her heels clicking aggressively against the polished concrete floor. She intercepts me near the reception desk, deliberately positioning her body to block me from entering the main party area. She reaches out and grabs my arm with a tight, punishing grip, her fingernails digging into the expensive fabric of my suit. Her eyes are wide with furious, controlling anger. She leans in close, her voice a venomous, frantic hiss. "Where is Zuri?" She demands, her tone dripping with entitlement. "Why are you here? You are going to ruin Trent's big night. You need to turn around and go back home right now. You are embarrassing the family." She expects me to shrink. She expects me to lower my eyes, apologize for intruding, and quietly retreat to the shadows, just like I have done for the past 35 years. She expects the obedient scapegoat to absorb her anger and comply with her demands to protect the family image. I look down at her hand clutching my arm. I do not flinch. I do not argue with her. I do not offer a single word of explanation or defense. I calmly raise my opposite hand, place my fingers over hers, and physically peel her grip off my body, one finger at a time. I look her dead in the eye with an expression of absolute, terrifying emptiness. The kind of look you give a complete stranger who has just offended you in public. Brenda stares at me, her mouth slightly open in shock. She has never seen me look at her like this. She has never encountered a version of her daughter who is completely immune to her manipulation. I do not say a single word to my mother. I simply step past her, leaving her standing frozen by the reception desk. I adjust my jacket, tighten my grip on my briefcase, and walk straight toward the center of the room, aiming directly for Jasmine Trent and the circle of wealthy venture capitalists they are desperately trying to defraud. The heavy bass from the DJ booth vibrates through the polished concrete floor, matching the steady and calculated rhythm of my footsteps. I walk past caterers carrying silver platters of seared Wagyu beef and truffle caviar. I pass by young software developers wearing expensive sneakers and local Atlanta socialites who have absolutely no idea they are attending a lavish party funded entirely by felony wire fraud. The entire room is a towering monument to Trent and Jasmine's aggressive insecurity. The modern track lighting catches the massive ice sculpture positioned directly in the center of the room. It is meticulously carved into the shape of Trent's startup logo, but the edges are already beginning to melt and drip into a silver tray. It is a perfect metaphor for his entire business model. I keep my eyes locked strictly on my targets. Trent and Jasmine are standing near the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook the glittering downtown skyline. They are flanking a man I immediately recognize from my accounting firm's corporate dossiers. He is a prominent venture capitalist, a man known throughout the city for writing massive checks to promising technology startups. Trent is leaning in close, utilizing every single ounce of his unearned confidence. He is gesturing broadly with a crystal tumbler of bourbon, passionately selling a vision of artificial intelligence integration that I know for a proven fact his company does not possess. Jasmine is standing right beside him wearing a permanent and highly practiced smile. She nods enthusiastically at everything Trent says, periodically touching the venture capitalist on the arm to feign charm and high society intimacy. I do not slow my pace as I approach their tight circle. I step directly into their line of sight, placing my body squarely between Trent and the panoramic view of the city. The venture capitalist pauses mid-sentence, his brow furrowing in confusion at the sudden and sharp interruption. Jasmine turns her head toward me. The moment her eyes register my face, her glowing, practiced smile shatters completely. It does not just fade, it instantly disintegrates into a mask of pure, unfiltered hostility. She looks at my custom emerald green suit, taking in the flawless tailoring and the uncompromising authority radiating from my posture. This is not the exhausted, accommodating older sister she expects to see. Jasmine takes a quick step forward, attempting to physically block me from the venture capitalist's view. She leans in close, her voice dropping to a harsh, venomous whisper meant only for my ears. She demands that I go wait in the back near the service elevators. She hisses that this area is reserved strictly for VIPs and that I have absolutely no business interrupting a critical funding conversation. I do not blink. I do not look at my sister. My eyes remain entirely fixed on her husband. Trent notices the immediate tension. He flashes a brilliant, artificially white smile, attempting to smooth over the awkwardness with his usual arrogant charm. He opens his mouth, likely to introduce me to the investor as some eccentric extended family member, but I do not give him the chance to control the narrative. I speak clearly, my voice slicing effortlessly through the heavy bass of the lounge music and the ambient chatter of the room. The tone I use is the exact same cold surgical voice I use when dissecting a fraudulent corporate ledger in a federal boardroom. I look Trent dead in the eye and tell him I am here for the rent. I state loudly and firmly that he is 5 months behind on his commercial lease. The venture capitalist immediately stops drinking his champagne. His eyes dart rapidly from Trent to me. His sharp business instincts instantly detect the heavy smell of financial blood in the water. Trent visibly pales, but he relies on the only defense mechanism he has ever known. He forces a loud, booming laugh that echoes awkwardly in the immediate space. He turns to the investor, shaking his head as if I am just a delightful, quirky nuisance. He tells the investor not to mind his sister-in-law. He claims I am always making these dry, inappropriate jokes at family gatherings. He actually tries to reach out and clap me on the shoulder, attempting to physically guide me away from the circle while projecting the image of a patient, tolerant tech founder dealing with a difficult relative. I step back smoothly, evading his touch. I do not smile. I do not match his forced, jovial energy. I lift my black leather briefcase and set it directly onto a high-top cocktail table positioned right next to them. The solid, heavy thud of the briefcase commands the attention of everyone in our immediate vicinity. I unlatch the brass locks with a sharp metallic click. I reach inside and pull out a thick stack of court-stamped legal documents, topped by the certified property deed for the commercial high-rise. I hold the documents up, making sure the county seals and the heavy black text are perfectly visible. I look at Trent and tell him this is no joke. I inform him that I am the sole owner of the blind limited liability company that holds the deed to this entire building. I tell him his commercial lease has been officially terminated due to severe financial default as of exactly 5 minutes ago. I also inform him that my private security team is currently downstairs locking the loading docks and completely shutting down the freight elevators. The silence that drops over our corner of the room is absolute and deafening. It ripples outward as the people standing nearby stop talking and turn to stare. The venture capitalist looks at the legal documents in my hand, then looks directly at Trent. The investor's expression transforms from polite interest to total unadulterated disgust. In the high-stakes world of venture capital, financial instability is a red flag. But being actively evicted by your own family member for gross negligence is a radioactive hazard. The investor does not say a single word. He simply sets his half-empty crystal flute down on a passing caterer's tray, turns on his heel, and briskly walks away, putting as much distance as possible between himself and the impending legal disaster. Trent watches his multi-million-dollar lifeline walk out the door. His mouth opens and closes, but no sound comes out. He is completely paralyzed by the sudden catastrophic destruction of his reality. But Jasmine does not freeze. Jasmine absolutely loses her mind. Her carefully curated influencer persona shatters into a million jagged pieces. She lunges forward, her voice rising to a shrill, hysterical scream that cuts over the DJ's music and brings the entire launch party to a dead halt. She screams that I cannot do this to them. She points a manicured finger at my chest, her face red and contorted with furious entitlement. She screams that they only used my name to get the business loan because I owed it to the family. She yells that I have plenty of money and they just needed my credit to keep the business afloat. I stand perfectly still, letting her words echo through the cavernous quiet room. Dozens of tech industry professionals, wealthy investors, and local Atlanta socialites are staring at her in absolute shock. The music has been completely cut off. Jasmine is so consumed by her own desperate anger that she does not even realize what she has just done. In her frantic attempt to justify her actions and paint me as the villain, she has just loudly and publicly confessed to committing felony identity theft and federal loan fraud in front of 30 highly credible witnesses. The reality of her public confession hits Trent a second later. The charismatic, easygoing tech founder persona completely drops away, revealing the desperate, aggressive fraud underneath. His face flushes a dark, angry purple. He steps forward, closing the distance between us, his physical posture suddenly threatening and volatile. He demands that I hand over the eviction notice. He reaches out aggressively, attempting to snatch the court-stamped documents directly out of my hands. His voice drops to a low, vicious growl as he threatens to destroy my career for embarrassing him in front of his peers. He thinks physical intimidation will force me to back down. He thinks because I am a woman, because I am his wife's sister, I will cower and surrender the paperwork to protect the family peace. He has absolutely no idea who he is dealing with or what is coming through the doors next. The heavy glass doors swing shut behind the venture capitalist, and with that soft click, the entire illusion of Trent's tech empire completely shatters. Trent watches his multi-million-dollar lifeline walk out the door, his mouth opening and closing in silent, hyperventilating panic. He is completely paralyzed by the sudden and catastrophic destruction of his reality. But Jasmine does not freeze. Jasmine absolutely loses her mind. Her carefully curated high society persona disintegrates into a million jagged pieces. The polished, glamorous tech wife vanishes, replaced by a frantic, deeply entitled woman who has never been told no in her entire life. She lunges forward, her voice rising to a shrill, hysterical pitch that slices over the ambient noise of the room. She points a manicured finger directly at my chest, her face flushed a dark, furious red. She screams that I cannot do this to them. She yells that I am ruining the most important night of their lives out of pure jealousy. And then, completely blinded by her own desperate rage, she crosses the point of no return. She screams at the top of her lungs that they only used my name for the business loan because I owed it to the family. She yells that I have plenty of money and that they just needed my immaculate credit score to keep the business afloat until the funding came through. The entire room goes dead silent. The caterers stop moving. The local Atlanta socialites lower their champagne glasses. The young software developers and potential investors stare at her in absolute, unadulterated shock. The music has already been cut off by the confused DJ, leaving Jasmine's words to echo loudly against the floor-to-ceiling windows. She is so utterly consumed by her lifetime habit of treating me as a disposable asset that she does not even realize the magnitude of what she just did. In her frantic attempt to justify her actions and paint me as the jealous older sister, she has just loudly and explicitly confessed to committing felony identity theft and federal loan fraud in front of 30 highly credible witnesses. The devastating reality of her public confession hits Trent a fraction of a second later. The charismatic, easygoing tech founder persona completely drops away, revealing the desperate, aggressive fraud underneath. The blood drains from his face, leaving him a sickening shade of pale before flushing a dark, violent crimson. He realizes that his wife just admitted to a federal crime in a room full of people who control the financial heartbeat of the city. He knows his reputation is permanently radioactive. Trent steps forward, closing the distance between us, his physical posture suddenly threatening and volatile. He demands that I hand over the eviction notice. He reaches out aggressively, attempting to snatch the court-stamped documents directly out of my hands. He thinks physical intimidation will force me to back down. He thinks because I am a black woman, because I am his wife's sister, I will cower and surrender the paperwork to protect the family peace. I do not flinch. I do not step back. I swiftly shift the heavy leather briefcase out of his reach and raise my free hand, planting my palm flat and hard against his chest to halt his advance. I look him dead in the eye and speak with a voice so cold and authoritative it stops him in his tracks. I calmly inform him that assaulting a commercial landlord during the lawful execution of a court-ordered eviction is a fast track to the county jail. I remind him that my private security team is currently waiting in the lobby and that the entire building is wired with high-definition surveillance cameras. I tell him that if he takes one more step toward me, I will add physical assault to the very long list of charges he is about to face. Trent breathes heavily, the sweat gathering at his temples and ruining the collar of his bespoke tuxedo. He drops his hand, but his voice lowers to a vicious, desperate growl. He threatens to destroy my accounting firm. He threatens to drag my name through the mud and sue me for everything I am worth for embarrassing him in front of his professional peers. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. I look around the quiet room, making eye contact with the shocked guests who are now subtly pulling out their phones to text their networks or record the fallout. I look back at Trent and tell him he does not have the money to sue a parking attendant, let alone a forensic accountant who owns the building he is standing in. I inform him that under the specific asset seizure clause of his commercial lease, every single item in this office now legally belongs to my holding company. The high-end espresso machines, the custom designer office furniture, the data servers, and the expensive desktop computers are currently being seized to cover the 5 months of rent he failed to pay. Jasmine gasps, looking around the lavishly decorated suite, as if the walls are closing in on her. She turns frantically to our parents, who are standing completely frozen near the melting ice sculpture. Calvin and Brenda are paralyzed by the extreme public humiliation. For their entire lives, they have worshipped at the altar of upper-class respectability. They have sacrificed my well-being to ensure their family appeared flawless to the elite circles of Atlanta. Now, they are standing in a rented office, watching their golden child confess to federal wire fraud, while their supposedly genius son-in-law faces a hostile commercial eviction. Jasmine begs our father to do something. She cries out for Calvin to make me stop demanding that he step in, and order me to hand over the building deed. She genuinely expects our parents to shield her from the consequences of her own criminal actions, just like they have always done. Calvin opens his mouth, taking a tentative step forward. He raises his hands in a placating gesture, his voice trembling as he tries to use his old authoritative tone. He calls my name and tells me we can handle this privately. He begs me not to destroy my sister's life over a temporary financial misunderstanding. I cut him off immediately. I tell my father that there is absolutely nothing temporary about forging my signature on a $200,000 federal loan document. I tell him there is nothing private about stealing my identity to bypass a credit check at Oak Ridge Preparatory Academy. I raise my voice just enough so that every single person in the room can hear the absolute truth. I announce that Jasmine and Trent stole my identity to fund this exact party, and then they abandoned their 6-year-old daughter in a school office so they could fly first class to the Maldives. A collective gasp ripples through the crowd of remaining guests. The investors and socialites stare at Jasmine and Trent with expressions of pure, unadulterated revulsion. Financial failure is one thing, but abandoning a small child to go on a luxury vacation crosses a moral boundary that no amount of smooth talking can ever erase. Several guests immediately set their drinks down and begin walking briskly toward the exit, desperate to escape the toxic fallout of this massive scandal. Jasmine covers her face with her hands, finally realizing the absolute magnitude of her destruction. She is not just losing her fake wealth, she is losing her entire social standing. She will be a pariah in every country club, private school, and high society circle in the state of Georgia. She looks up at me, tears streaming down her face, and tells me I am a monster for doing this to my own blood. I look at my sister, feeling absolutely no pity. I tell her that I did not force her to steal from me. I did not force her to abandon Zuri. I did not force her to live a fake plastic life built entirely on lies and other people's money. I tell her that she built this house of cards entirely on her own, and I am simply the one handing her the final bill. Trent is frantically pulling out his cell phone, his hands shaking so violently he can barely unlock the screen. He is likely trying to call his own lawyer, completely unaware that no attorney in the city can stop a legally executed commercial eviction that is already in progress. He looks at me with eyes full of terrified, desperate hatred. He realizes that I have outmaneuvered him on every single level. He thought I was just an invisible, boring accountant he could use and discard. He never realized he was dealing with a woman who builds impenetrable legal fortresses for a living. I stand in the center of the room, my emerald suit immaculate, my posture unbroken. The caterers are quietly packing up their equipment. The DJ is dismantling his sound system. The massive ice sculpture carved into the shape of Trent's logo has cracked down the middle, a puddle of cold water spreading across the floor. The stage is perfectly set. They are completely exposed, completely ruined, and entirely trapped by their own arrogant choices. And the absolute best part is that I am not even finished with them yet. I do not break eye contact with Trent as his hand hovers over his phone screen. He is paralyzed, trapped between the humiliating reality of his commercial eviction and the undeniable fact that his wife just confessed to a federal crime in front of Atlanta high society. I turn my head slightly toward the heavy glass double doors at the entrance of the suite. I give a single deliberate nod. 2 men in sharp, unassuming business suits step through the doors. They do not look like private security, and they certainly do not look like venture capitalists. They are federal agents, and they have been waiting patiently in the lobby for my exact signal. Before the agents cross the room, I turn my attention back to my sister. Jasmine is sobbing now, her designer makeup running down her face in dark streaks. I reach into my black leather briefcase one final time. I pull out a thick stack of documents bound in a heavy blue legal folder. I step forward and press the folder directly against Jasmine's chest, forcing her to take it. She looks down at the paper, her hands trembling so violently she can barely hold it. I tell her this is not just an eviction notice. I inform her that this is a court-ordered, judge-approved mandate granting me full, immediate physical and legal guardianship of Zuri. Jasmine gasps the air, leaving her lungs as if she has been physically struck. I keep my voice deadly calm. I tell her that when she abandoned her 6-year-old daughter in a school office to fly first class to a tropical island, she proved she was entirely unfit to be a mother. I let her know that the family court judge saw the forged enrollment documents, saw the flight records, and did not hesitate for a single second to strip her of her parental rights. Zuri is safe in my home, and Jasmine will not be allowed anywhere near her. The two plainclothes officers finally reach our circle. They flip open their leather wallets, the federal badges catching the bright modern lighting of the room. The lead agent speaks in a crisp, authoritative voice. He addresses Trent and Jasmine by their full legal names. He announces that he holds active federal warrants for their immediate arrest on charges of aggravated identity theft, bank fraud, and federal wire fraud. The sound of metal handcuffs clicking into place cuts through the dead silence of the room. The remaining caterers and guests watch in absolute morbid fascination as the golden couple of the Atlanta tech scene is physically restrained. Trent is sweating profusely, stammering out weak, pathetic excuses about bridge loans and simple misunderstandings. Jasmine is wailing, crying out that her designer dress is being ruined, completely incapable of processing the brutal reality of federal prison. They are paraded right past the melting ice sculpture of Trent's fake company, their utter humiliation broadcast to everyone they ever tried to impress. This is the exact moment Calvin and Brenda finally snap out of their paralyzed shock. My parents rush forward, pushing past the remaining guests. Calvin's face is a mask of desperate patriarchal fury. He reaches out as if to grab my shoulder, but stops himself when I fix him with a glare so cold it freezes him in his tracks. He uses his loudest, most demanding voice. He yells at me to stop this madness right now. He demands that I call off the police, telling me that these are just misunderstandings that can be fixed with a simple check. He shouts that we are family, and family does not do this to one another. I look at the man who raised me, a man who consistently chose his own ego and his white son-in-law over the safety and sanity of his black daughter. I look at my mother who is sobbing into her hands, terrified of the social scandal that will permanently ruin her country club reputation. I do not raise my voice. I speak with a profound, unbreakable stillness. I tell them that they stopped being my family the exact day they decided my total financial ruin was an acceptable price to pay for a luxury lifestyle. I tell them they stopped being my parents the day they helped forge my signature and abandon a 6-year-old child just so they could play rich in front of their friends. But I am a forensic accountant, and I never leave a ledger unbalanced. I look my father dead in the eye and ask him if he actually read the fine print on the loan origination documents he signed as an official witness. Calvin blinks, his false bravado faltering as a new wave of terror washes over his face. I explain the brutal reality of commercial banking law to him. I tell him that because he and Brenda actively co-signed and verified a fraudulent federal loan application, they are not just witnesses, they are legally and financially liable co-conspirators. I watch the exact moment the color drains entirely from my mother's face. I inform them that when I reported the $200,000 wire fraud to the regional bank and the federal authorities, the bank immediately moved to secure their stolen capital. I tell my parents that as of this morning, the bank has placed a massive, inescapable legal lien against their suburban home. The house they have spent decades refinancing and leveraging to buy expensive cars and designer clothes is now frozen asset collateral. I let the truth sink deep into their bones. I tell them they are bankrupt. I tell them the bank is going to seize their property to cover Trent's stolen money, and that they will be incredibly lucky if the federal prosecutor does not indict them alongside Jasmine for criminal conspiracy. Calvin staggers backward, as if the floor has literally dropped out from underneath him. Brenda lets out a raw, guttural sob, clutching her chest as her entire fabricated universe collapses into dust. They sold their souls to maintain a fake image of wealth, and now they are going to lose everything they ever cared about. I do not offer them a single ounce of comfort. I do not shed a tear. I simply turn my back on them. I walk through the silent, stunned crowd of software developers and socialites. I walk past the abandoned champagne glasses and the discarded plates of expensive catered food. I push open the heavy glass double doors and step out into the cool, crisp Atlanta night. The air has never tasted sweeter. I have leveled the playing field, audited their lives, and collected every single debt. The drive back to my secure estate that night was the most peaceful journey of my entire life. I navigated the familiar Atlanta highways, as the adrenaline slowly drained from my system, replaced by a profound and absolute stillness. I had spent 35 years contorting myself into whatever shape my family demanded. I had swallowed their insults, funded their mistakes, and accepted the role of the invisible workhorse just to keep the peace. But as I pulled through the heavy iron security gates of my neighborhood, I realized the peace was never mine to keep. It belonged entirely to them, paid for by my suffering. Tonight I finally stopped paying the toll. I parked my car in the garage and walked into my quiet, pristine home. My trusted nanny met me in the kitchen, assuring me that the evening had been completely uneventful. I thanked her, paid her a generous bonus for the weekend, and locked the front door behind her. I took off my suit jacket, draped it over a chair, and walked softly down the hallway to the guest room. I gently pushed the door open. Zuri was fast asleep in the center of the bed, her breathing slow and steady. She was clutching the new teddy bear I had bought her, completely oblivious to the catastrophic collapse of the toxic world she had been born into. Looking down at my beautiful, innocent niece, the last lingering trace of guilt I held regarding my parents and my sister vanished entirely. I did not just destroy my abusers tonight. I protected a child from being raised by narcissistic criminals who saw her as nothing more than a social media prop. I pulled the blanket up over her small shoulders, turned on the nightlight, and whispered a promise that she would never have to earn her right to be loved ever again. The fallout began the very next morning, and it was swift, brutal, and entirely public. By Monday, the story of the disastrous VIP launch party had ripped through the Atlanta tech and investment circles like wildfire. The venture capitalist who had walked out of the suite spread the word that Trent was not a visionary founder, but a desperate fraud who was actively being evicted by his own family. Trent's reputation was instantly and permanently vaporized. No reputable firm in the city would even take his phone calls. Meanwhile, my corporate attorney Elijah and my property management team executed the asset seizure with ruthless efficiency. I did not have to lift a single finger. The holding company sent a fleet of moving trucks to the commercial high-rise. Under the supervision of armed security, every single asset inside Suite 400 was systematically boxed up and hauled away. The high-end espresso machines, the custom designer lounge furniture, the massive dual-monitor computer setups, and the expensive data servers were all seized and liquidated at a private commercial auction. The proceeds went directly toward satisfying the 5 months of unpaid rent and the penalties outlined in the lease agreement. Trent's entire fake empire was packed into cardboard boxes and sold to the highest bidder in less than 48 hours. Jasmine and Trent did not come home. They were denied bail at their initial federal arraignment. The magistrate judge reviewed the forged school documents, the flight records showing they had fled to the Maldives, and the sheer volume of the $200,000 wire fraud, and deemed them severe flight risks. They were remanded to federal custody while awaiting trial. The glamorous influencer, who could not be seen without a designer handbag, was now wearing a standard issue county jumpsuit, stripped of her phone, her followers, and her unearned pride. My parents fared no better. Calvin and Brenda had built their entire identities on the illusion of generational wealth and country club prestige. They desperately wanted to be part of the elite black upper class of Atlanta, but they had financed that dream on a mountain of high-interest debt and broken promises. When the regional bank executed the legal lien against their suburban home to recover the stolen loan funds, the collapse was spectacular. I received exactly 3 voicemails from my father before I blocked his number permanently. His tone shifted from demanding to bargaining to outright begging. He pleaded with me to release the building assets, to drop the fraud charges, to call the bank and explain it was all a big family misunderstanding. He actually told me that my mother was having heart palpitations from the stress and that their neighbors were starting to ask questions. I listened to his frantic voice and felt absolutely nothing. I deleted the voicemails and instructed Elijah to send a formal cease and desist letter, forbidding them from contacting me or approaching my property. Within a month, the bank foreclosed on their heavily mortgaged home. The bright red auction sign pounded into their perfectly manicured front lawn was the ultimate social humiliation. The people they had spent decades trying to impress turned their backs on them completely. The country club revoked their membership due to unpaid dues and the swirling rumors of federal fraud. Their affluent friends stopped returning their calls, unwilling to associate with a family entangled in such a massive, public scandal. Calvin and Brenda were forced to pack whatever belongings they could fit into a rented truck and move into a cramped, modest apartment on the outskirts of the city. They had sacrificed my future to protect their image, and in the end, they lost both. Fast forward 6 months. The dust has completely settled, and the toxicity has been entirely excised from my life. The legal system moved with a heavy, crushing finality. Trent, facing a mountain of undeniable digital evidence and a team of ruthless federal prosecutors, took a plea deal to avoid a maximum sentence. He is currently serving 6 years in a federal penitentiary for wire fraud and aggravated identity theft. His tech startup was formally dissolved, leaving him with nothing but a felony record and a ruined future. Jasmine attempted to play the victim during her hearings. She hired a public defender and tried to claim that Trent had manipulated her, that she was just a naive wife who did not understand the paperwork she was signing. But my lawyer Elijah introduced the text messages, the perfectly forged signatures, and the audio recordings of her bragging about the fraudulent loan. The family court judge was absolutely merciless. Due to the severe neglect, the documented abandonment, and her subsequent felony convictions, Jasmine was formally and permanently stripped of her parental rights. I stood in that quiet family courtroom, wearing a sharp navy blue suit, and raised my right hand. I swore an oath to protect, provide for, and cherish my niece. The judge signed the final decree granting me full permanent legal and physical custody of Zuri. She was no longer just my niece. In the eyes of the law and in my heart, she was my daughter. Today, my life looks entirely different than it did a year ago. I am sitting in the sunlit kitchen of my secure estate. The large glass doors are open to the backyard, letting in the warm afternoon breeze. Zuri is sitting at the kitchen island, swinging her legs, just like she did on that terrifying day in the school office. But today, there are no tears. She is laughing, her face smeared with a little bit of chocolate from the cookies we just baked together. She is wearing a bright yellow dress, her hair beautifully braided. She has been enrolled in a wonderful, nurturing local school where the teachers actually communicate with me. She takes piano lessons on Tuesdays and plays in a youth soccer league on the weekends. The anxious, neglected little girl who used to hide in hotel bathrooms is gone. In her place is a vibrant, confident, and deeply loved child who knows exactly where her home is. She calls me mom now, a transition that happens so naturally and beautifully, it still brings tears to my eyes when I think about it. I pour myself a cup of tea and look out over my pristine backyard. My forensic accounting firm is thriving, having secured 2 massive new corporate contracts. My commercial real estate portfolio is expanding, managed perfectly by a team I trust implicitly. I have built a fortress of peace, wealth, and love, and I did it all with my own 2 hands. My parents are living out their days in bitter, isolated regret. They have no access to me, no access to my wealth, and absolutely no access to the brilliant, beautiful granddaughter they were willing to discard. They made their choices, and now they are living with the exact consequences they earned. I learned the hardest lesson a person can learn about blood and loyalty. I learned that just because people share your DNA does not mean they share your values, your morals, or your capacity for love. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones holding the knife. But I also learned that you do not have to accept the role they write for you. You do not have to be the scapegoat. You do not have to absorb their abuse to keep a toxic peace. You have the power to audit your own life, clear the debts, and walk away entirely intact. If you have ever felt like the disposable member of your family, if you have ever been used, financially drained, or emotionally abandoned by the people who were supposed to cherish you, please know this. Your worth is not determined by their inability to value you. You have the absolute right to set unbreakable boundaries. You have the right to protect your peace, your assets, and your future. Do not set yourself on fire to keep them warm. Have you ever had to legally or financially cut off toxic family members to protect yourself and the people you truly love? How did you find the courage to finally draw that line and walk away? Share your stories and your victories in the comments below. If this journey of reclaiming power and finding true justice resonated with you, Please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories about resilience, boundaries, and building a beautiful life on your own terms. Remember, the best revenge is not destruction. The absolute best revenge is building a life so incredibly successful and peaceful that their absence is nothing but a relief. Thank you for listening to my story. Take care of yourselves, protect your peace, and never apologize for knowing your worth. 6 months have passed since the night I locked the doors on my sister and her husband, completely dismantling their fraudulent empire under the bright lights of their own launch party. The dust has settled, the legal audits have concluded, and the ledgers of my life are finally perfectly balanced. The toxicity that choked my family for 3 decades has been entirely surgically excised from my world. I sat in the polished wooden pews of the federal courthouse last Tuesday and watched the absolute finality of justice being served. Trent stood before the federal judge wearing a standard-issue beige jumpsuit instead of his bespoke, tailored tuxedos. He looked incredibly small. The arrogant, charismatic tech founder persona had completely evaporated, leaving behind nothing but a terrified man who finally realized he could not smooth talk his way out of federal wire fraud. His defense attorney attempted to argue for leniency, citing Trent's previous lack of a criminal record and his supposed entrepreneurial ambitions. The judge did not even entertain the motion. The sheer volume of the evidence my legal team and I provided, the forged signatures, the misdirected funds, the blatant use of stolen credit to fund luxury vacations, left no room for mercy. Trent was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison with no possibility of early parole. I watched the bailiff lead him out of the courtroom in handcuffs. He did not look back. He knew he had absolutely no power left. Jasmine faced an even harsher reality. Her trial is still pending, but the family court system moved with a swift and merciless precision. The judge reviewed the extensive documentation of her severe child neglect. He saw the flight records proving she abandoned a 6-year-old child in a school office to fly first class to the Maldives. He saw the financial statements proving she prioritized designer dresses over her own daughter's tuition and safety. Jasmine sat across the courtroom from me, stripped of her expensive makeup and her carefully curated influencer wardrobe. She looked utterly broken. When the judge struck his gavel and officially stripped her of her parental rights permanently, she let out a hollow, agonizing sob. She tried to call out my name as we left the courtroom, begging me to let her see Zuri just one more time. I did not stop walking. I did not turn my head. She forfeited her right to be a mother the day she decided my niece was nothing more than a disposable accessory. My parents' downfall was a slow, humiliating public spectacle. Calvin and Brenda had spent their entire adult lives worshiping at the altar of upper-class respectability. They sacrificed my emotional well-being to ensure their golden child had everything she desired, simply to impress a social circle that never truly cared about them. When the regional bank executed the legal lien against their suburban home to recover the stolen loan funds, the collapse was absolute. The bank foreclosed on their property within 90 days. A bright red auction sign was driven into their perfectly manicured front lawn, broadcasting their financial ruin to the entire neighborhood. The elite Atlanta society they had so desperately tried to cling to turned their backs on them instantly. Their country club revoked their membership. Their affluent friends stopped returning their phone calls, terrified that the federal fraud investigation would somehow stain their own reputations. Calvin and Brenda were forced to pack whatever belongings they could fit into a small rented truck and move into a cramped, outdated apartment complex on the far outskirts of the city. My father attempted to use his extended family network to pressure me into saving them. He sent my aunts and uncles to my corporate office armed with guilt trips about how family is supposed to stick together through hard times. I sat in my boardroom, looked my relatives dead in the eye, and handed them copies of the forged loan documents my parents had willingly co-signed. I asked them if they would empty their own bank accounts to save people who actively tried to send them to federal prison. The flying monkeys went entirely silent. They left my office and never brought up the subject again. I instructed my lawyer to file a watertight restraining order against my parents, legally forbidding them from contacting me, approaching my property, or attempting to reach out to my niece. They are completely cut off. They have to work menial retail jobs just to afford their basic rent. Calvin works the floor at a local hardware store, and Brenda answers phones for a dental clinic. The absolute destruction of their pride is the exact price they paid for enabling a monster. Today, my reality is a fortress of profound peace. The sun is setting, casting a warm golden glow through the large floor-to-ceiling windows of my secure estate. The house smells like roasted garlic and fresh herbs from the dinner simmering on the stove. I am sitting at my wide marble kitchen island. Sitting right beside me is Zuri. She is wearing her favorite purple pajamas, her hair neatly braided and secured with colorful beads. She is chewing on the end of a yellow pencil, concentrating deeply on a first-grade math worksheet. The anxious, terrified little girl who used to hide in hotel bathrooms while her parents partied is completely gone. In her place is a vibrant, confident, and deeply cherished child. The intense therapy we started 6 months ago has worked wonders. She no longer flinches when the doorbell rings. She no longer asks if I am going to leave her behind. She knows with absolute certainty that this house is her forever home and that she is the most important person in my world. She looks up from her worksheet, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. She slides the paper toward me and announces she solved the final problem. I review her math, praising her intelligence and her hard work. Her eyes light up with pure joy. She wraps her small arms around my waist and hugs me tightly. She calls me Mom now. It is a transition we never forced, a natural evolution born out of consistent safety, warm meals, and unconditional love. Every time she says it, a deep, healing warmth spreads through my chest. I pour myself a cup of herbal tea and look around my beautiful, quiet home. My forensic accounting firm has just closed its most profitable quarter in history. My commercial real estate portfolio has expanded, and I recently purchased 2 new high-rise buildings in the downtown district. I am respected by my peers, feared by my adversaries, and completely financially impenetrable. I do not need validation from my father. I do not need approval from my mother. I do not need to shrink myself to make my sister feel powerful. I look directly at the audience, speaking to anyone who has ever been forced into the role of the family scapegoat. I spent 30 years believing that my quiet stability made me boring. I believed that because I did not demand attention, I did not deserve respect. My family treated my independence as a weapon to use against me, assuming I would always be the invisible safety net, waiting to catch them when they fell. They grossly underestimated the power of a woman who builds her own empire brick by brick in the dark. If you are watching this, and you are currently carrying the heavy, suffocating burden of toxic family members, hear my words carefully. You do not owe your success to the people who mistreated you. You do not owe your financial security to parents who enabled your abuse. Blood does not automatically grant someone unlimited access to your peace, your bank account, or your future. You have the absolute right to lock the doors. You have the right to audit your relationships and permanently evict anyone who is bringing deficit to your life. Breaking generational curses and cutting off toxic family members is a brutal, agonizing process. It will test every single ounce of your resolve. People will call you cold. They will call you unforgiving. They will try to use your shared history to manipulate your boundaries. Let them talk. The opinions of people who benefit from your suffering are completely irrelevant. I walked into a lion's den, wearing an emerald green suit and armed with nothing but the undeniable truth. I tore down a fraudulent empire, sent 2 criminals to federal prison, and rescued a beautiful child from a life of severe neglect. I leveled the playing field and collected every single debt I was owed. I am no longer the forgotten older sister. I am a wealthy, independent Black woman who built an empire and created a real loving family entirely on my own terms. Thank you for listening to my journey. Remember that your worth is absolute. Protect your peace, safeguard your assets, and never apologize for building a life that the people who hurt you cannot afford to enter. Take care of yourselves and never be afraid to serve the final eviction notice. Looking back on everything that happened, the greatest lesson I learned is that blood does not automatically grant someone a lifelong pass to your peace. For so many years, I was conditioned to believe that being the bigger person meant absorbing the abuse, funding the mistakes, and staying quiet, while my own family treated me like a disposable asset. In our community, we are so often taught that family is everything, that you protect your own no matter what, and that walking away is the ultimate betrayal. But the harsh truth I had to learn is that true betrayal is a family that demands your absolute loyalty while actively plotting your financial and emotional ruin. They expected me to be the invisible safety net because they confused my quiet stability with weakness. They thought my success was just a resource for them to exploit, assuming I would always shrink myself to fit their toxic narrative. But what they did not realize is that when you build your own life from the ground up, you learn exactly how to protect it. Cutting off toxic family members is an agonizing process. It goes against everything we are taught to value as women. But when the people who are supposed to cherish and protect you are the exact ones holding the knife setting, an unbreakable boundary is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of profound self-preservation and survival. I had to stop waiting for apologies that were never going to come. I had to realize that my worth was not tied to their ability to acknowledge it. Taking full custody of my niece and completely dismantling the fraudulent life they built showed me that we have the power to break generational curses. We do not have to inherit the trauma they try to pass down to us. We can step out of the shadows and rewrite the script entirely. Today, my life is filled with genuine love, absolute financial security, and a beautiful daughter who knows she is entirely safe. The family I built is far stronger than the one I left behind. If you have ever been the designated scapegoat in your family, I want you to know that your success is yours to keep and your boundaries are completely valid. Have you ever had to walk away from toxic relatives to protect your peace and build your true life? Share your story in the comments below, hit that like button, and subscribe to join a community of people who are reclaiming their power.